Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. And up first here, cold temperatures, winter-like temperatures finally. Afternoon readings here, mid-afternoon readings, Chukitzik at 53 degrees below zero. They're up in the Yukon Flats, not too far from Fort Yukon, where they were sitting at minus 51. And these are actually also the low temperatures for these sites as well. And Arctic Village, 47 below, and Chicken, 44 below. And I guess honorable mention, go to the Fairbanks area in the 30 to 35 below range for temperatures. So moving on to the hazardous weather graphic. No watches, warnings, advisories for interior Alaska, as well as the Aleutians, Bering Sea, or southern Alaska, but there is a winter weather advisory out there for the eastern Arctic coast there from Cape Fairweather to Cape Suckling, including Yakutat for 3 to 7 inches of snow. And that kicks into effect at midday Sunday, tomorrow, and continues through tomorrow night. And then their winter storm warning for heavy snow is out for the Lynn Canal area, Haynesboro, Klondike Highway, Taya Inlet, and they're looking for 8 to 12 inches of snow during the same time period as this winter weather advisory is out from about noon tomorrow and continuing through tomorrow night there for those areas, but does not include the Juneau area there. Just it looks very, very close, but Juneau's outside of the warning area. Again, it's the Haynesboro, Klondike Highway, Lynn Canal zones. And from there, taking a look at satellite imagery, showers here, heaviest over the southern southeast coast. Klawock picking about 1/3 of an inch of precipitation, so not all that heavy, but by contrast, about 1/1200ths at Wrangell, just 2/100ths of an inch that fell in the form of both rain and snow in the Juneau area today. Didn't really get a lot in Yakutat from this area cloudiness, and this former frontal boundary really falling to pieces quite rapidly here, just spreading some clouds, looks like into Cook Inlet, not much in the way of any snow shower activity seem to be back west of the Alaska Range, and it's pretty scattered and light, extending up to the northwest there. Nome had less than 1/2 an inch of snow today, as well as Kotzebue, and some areas might have got an inch up toward the western Brooks Range, but generally less than an inch too, just a trace, nothing at all, kind of a break here between this weakening trough and the next pretty good frontal system, big storm coming into the, crossing the central Aleutians there around Adak today, where they had wind gusts up to about 50 to 60 miles an hour. And we're looking at wind and rain pushing in across the eastern Aleutians and rain into the western Alaska Peninsula. Winds on the increase as well. Akwin Island seeing gusts upwards of 50 miles an hour. Winds kicking up to about 40 miles an hour at Cold Bay this afternoon, and winds about 50 miles an hour also there at St. George, there southeast of St. Paul Island. Winds also increasing there, and northwest winds are currently increasing as colder air wraps in back around to the bent back occlusion. They're getting gusts to about 50 miles an hour now at Shemya. Those will probably increase during the night tonight. Otherwise, not a lot going on. Looks like some clouds trying to drop down onto the eastern Arctic coast there. And again, those cold temperatures making the satellite imagery here look quite like cloud white there over the Yukon Flats area. It's actually mostly clear. And on the chart here, a few lost stray showers along the southwest coast here, and not much more along this trough. Some of that trying to get into Cook Inlet, but whatever it does will be very light and scattered in nature. And the light stuff up here a little more widespread, but again, amounts quite light there across from the Nulato Hills up maybe Selawik Valley, Kotzebue along the northwest coast. Arctic high with the cold temperatures over the eastern interior. and kind of breezy in areas, but not too bad. Potato Point wind there, Prince William Sound, gusts to about 45 miles an hour during the afternoon. May have had gusts, say, out of the Copper River Delta, could have been in the 40 to 60 mile an hour range. And not so much wind here over the southeast coast, the gradient up there in the Yukon, with a trough right across the area there, bringing mixed precipitation to, well, from Dixon Entrance all the way up to White Pass. Clearing out there, Kodiak Island, AKwx seeing wind gusts 40 to 50 miles an hour today, but those starting to come down as this ridge axis moves in, the gradient slackens ahead of the rapidly increasing southwest wind, or southeast winds here with that 960 millibar storm that we'll see tonight. Really doesn't move much. Pulls up a little bit to the northeast there, just southwest or west-southwest of the Perbeloff Islands. Very tight gradient on the south side of that. Southern Bering Sea, possible hurricane-force winds, definitely storm-force winds, and gales out in advance of this front. But as the front pushes eastward here, it's the wind field's weakening, and so the threat of storm-force winds probably goes away here by late tonight. But the gales will continue, and enough gradient here, you'll see probably full gales there from Cape Nunavut up across Nunavak Island to, well, probably south of Cape Romanzoff. And the precipitation area really is suppressed to the south here as it tries to push into the cold air mass. So it's kind of narrowing there, especially in advance of that occluded front, but the main push here off to the east. High pressure slowly giving way, but holding over the eastern interior. Another clear, cold night there. Arctic coast on down to the Kenai Peninsula. Clouds, diminishing snow flurries here in the northwest with that weak system that's about to get pushed back to the west here as this easterly flow kind of sets up. Otherwise, low pressure just near Yakutat, supporting that winter weather advisory type weather that'll kick in tomorrow and last through tomorrow night, and just a mixture of rain or snow. Again, any elevation at all, you have snow there across the panhandle. And for tomorrow, same sort of pattern here, except looking for heavier precipitation again in those warning watch areas and advisory zones. And mixed precipitation with diminishing winds there for Kodiak as that front kind of lifts north, pushes east. And this low center still has a very low pressure with it. Strong winds here, mainly the eastern Aleutians, sort of into the Alaska Peninsula. Strong easterly winds now here, northern Bering Sea to the Bering Strait, and that pushing this area of moisture finally out of the area, except for the Bering Strait coast. St. Lawrence Island, probably Savunga may not see much. Gamble could see a little bit, but those are very light amounts. Heavier snow with this system down here, Perbeloff Islands and the southern Bering Sea. And snowfall levels should start to come down there for the central Aleutians late tomorrow night. Taking a look at Monday, that low center pulls into Bristol Bay here, up to 975 millibars, and still a respectable pressure there, but the gradient not as impressive as it was. Still pretty breezy here, especially over the northern interior. Those winds on the increase up here, and temperatures staying well below zero, so windy areas looks like passes of the Brooks Range. Wind chills maybe 50 below, or the 40 to 50 below range possibly in the windy areas there. Also here for the Chukchi Sea, a little bit of an increase in northerly winds here. Bering Strait coast, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down to the Pribilofs. Cold front keeping snow in over the central Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, especially on the Bering Sea side there. The moisture picking up and stacking up along the north shore of the Alaska Peninsula for pretty persistent snowfall probably. Cold front pushes the snow into the northern panhandle again for Monday. Heavy snow starting to taper off in the afternoon, as well as the eastern North Gulf Coast possibly, where they'll kick the advisory and warning out longer. And a mixture of rain or snow, probably Dixon Entrance, so it looks like snow except for the outer coastline of the panhandle and areas above 500 feet. Looking at low temperatures down that way tonight, up lower 20s in the north to upper 30s south, and below zero, 10 to 20 below, so Susitna Valley, and near zero, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, well below zero, Copper River Basin, and look for lows anywhere from 35 to 55 below here for the northeast areas. Single numbers all the way out until you get to the coastline. Then you're just under 20 at Nunavak Island, just under freezing at the Pribilofs, and 21 for St. Lawrence Island, mid-30s central Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And then highs tomorrow, anywhere from 12 to 22 below there for the North Slope and Arctic coastal areas, a little milder east and west. Highs 30 to 40, northeast interior, minus 20 for the highs Tanana Valley, and then single numbers to mid-teens here south of the Alaska Range, but near freezing along the North Gulf Coast. Upper 30s Kodiak Island, lower 40s with milder southerly flow. Southwest flow coming into the Alaska Peninsula, and highs in the mid to upper 30s for the Panhandle. That'll be followed by lows there. Really not much lower to upper 30s for your morning lows on Monday there, and maybe a little milder here. That would be mainly due to the increase in the winds here for the northeast and northern interior, but still well below zero. Single numbers for Cook Inlet to teens for Cook Inlet. Single numbers, northern Cook Inlet near zero in the Susitna Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, we've got with that big storm coming up into the Bering Sea with it a big batch of IFR along and north of the low center and along in advance of the front here, spreading into Bristol Bay. Marginal VFR here to southwest Kodiak Island by tomorrow morning. VFR in the interior. Marginal VFR with some IFR there over Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, and into the lower Yukon River Valley, and to a certain extent in the Kuskokwim Valley. And we've got IFR over the eastern Panhandle. And for the afternoon, stays pretty good here over much of interior Alaska, except southern Alaska here, especially down toward the coast, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Delta, with the IFR extending from Nunivak Island eastward now. Southern Cook Inlet edging northward into western Prince William Sound. Persistent IFR there along the eastern southeast coast. Good VFR in the interior, patchy marginal VFR here and there, especially up on the north slope central Arctic coast. And then for Monday morning, this area kind of slips down to the south a little bit here, but marginal VFR extending all the way back up to the Bering Strait coast, even with some IFR there for Gamble. Areas of mostly marginal conditions for the Aleutians. IFR there between Unalaska Island into the western Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering, Bristol Bay, and now that band inland across southern Alaska. A little farther to north, most of the Kuskokwim Valley looks IFR there. Cook Inlet IFR, southern Susitna Valley, maybe even the Matanuska Valley IFR. And that'll extend along the coast range from the western Copper River Basin right on down into the northern 2/3 or so of the Panhandle. And the north slope, marginal VFR, some areas of IFR on out to the central Arctic coast. And then for the afternoon, IFR north slope from about the crest of the Brooks Range, maybe some marginal VFR down south of the mountains there into the northern Koyukuk Valley, and then a band IFR eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Panhandle IFR here hung up in the coast range across Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, southern Cook Inlet, also from the Kuskokwim Valley here into and across Bristol Bay to the Alaska Peninsula. IFR there, Bering Strait coast and north side, north shore there of St. Lawrence Island, and then marginal VFR, Bering Sea, and the Aleutians trying to become VFR out west. Passes tomorrow for Anatuvik and Anigan, yet another VFR day coming up there, maybe a couple of them possibly, and Anigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out VFR and then moisture slipping on up with that storm, becoming marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrances of both passes. And rainy, looks like it'll stay VFR the entire day. Look for an increase in the clouds, though, in the afternoon, and ceilings lowering, but they won't hit the marginal threshold until maybe tomorrow evening, tomorrow night. Windy VFR. Isabel, good VFR, and Mentasta looking good. Tanita, VFR day. Portage, VFR becoming marginal VFR, and even possibly IFR late in the afternoon on the eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, kind of a marginal day for those two passes. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet southern Panhandle, Alaska Peninsula at the surface here near St. Matthew Island, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, hugging the North Gulf Coast. Icing, big area of areas of light to isolated moderate rime icing or mixed icing back through this area. And then the main band here with the front, Kodiak Island, best chance of seeing some considerable moderate rime icing. And then some scattered areas of possible icing for the Panhandle. Jet stream. Big storm here associated with this upper level low and the strong jet in the south side of that, 140, 160 knots. And then the cold air here with the polar jets and the polar lows there over interior Alaska. And 9,000 feet easterly flow across the Bering Sea in the north, westerly flow pretty strong here on the south side of this system as it lifts northward, 40 to 80 knots there for the Aleutians, strongest central eastern Aleutians. and about 30 knots coming into Kodiak Island. Otherwise, the easterly flow lighter up here in the interior, 15 to 20, maybe 25 knots. Southwesterlies, 9,000 feet, 20 to 30 knots across the southeast coast, but at 3,000 feet, much lighter, looking at 10 or 5 to 15 knots there, right up into the eastern interior. In fact, interior Alaska looking pretty light, and the winds becoming variable the farther north you go. But around this low center, westerlies, central eastern Aleutians, 60 to 70 knots, 30 to 35 there up the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak. Easterlies, 25, but increasing to 55 knots over the northern Bering Sea, but only 15 for St. Lawrence Island. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop. In fact, look for severe here for the eastern Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula below 4,000 feet. Otherwise, light to isolated moderate chop, pretty considerable here in the shaded areas across southern Alaska.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become tsunami ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village.
Yeah.
What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest tsunami ready city is Seward,
Good.
you know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, you know, the main players, but we've got several tsunami ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, you know, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those. And, you know, and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The tsunami ready signage is really blatant. It's this, you know, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when. It'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right, okay, all right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay, very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, just Tsunami Ready,
Google
and that'll
Tsunami
get you
Ready.
there.
Okay.
Mhm. And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist
Okay.
at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay, all right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis at this
No,
point.
they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964.
Mm-hmm. Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. See you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast here for the southern southeast coast, west-southwest 15 knots, seas at about 8 feet, and then southwest 15 to 20 knots on the north coast with seas 8 to 9 feet. Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots, south winds 15 knots for Stevens Passage, and south winds 10 knots with 3-foot seas for Clarence Strait. And for Monday, gale warnings here for Clarence Strait. Big jump in the winds down there. South 35 knots, seas building to 8 feet. Southeast 25 for small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, as well as other areas of the central inside waters. And Lynn Canal, south winds at 20, seas about 4 feet. Also have gale warnings here on the south coast there for winds of 35 knots from the southwest. Otherwise, southwest 25 knots with 13-foot seas for the remainder of the coastline. Prince William Sound tomorrow, light east winds at about 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast 25, and east 30 knots for the western North Gulf Coast area, south of the Kenai Peninsula here. Gale warnings, 35-knot easterly winds for the Barren Islands, and northeast 40-knot winds, Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings also out for southern Cook Inlet, northeast 35, north of the Foreland Zone, northeast at 20. Outlook for Monday, north 15 here for northern Cook Inlet, and then small craft advisories northeast 25 knots, southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay. Switch the direction there, 25 knot southwest winds for the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast, seas running 11 to 13 feet. Prince William Sound, south 15, seas at 3 feet. Kodiak Island for tomorrow, we've got northeasterly gales in a forecast for the Shelikof Strait area. Otherwise, here on the Pacific side, southeast 30, and gale warnings flying here for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 40 to 45 knots, east 40 knots there for Bristol Bay, and from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, south 35 knots, seas 16 feet. And for Monday, west winds 40 to 50 knots with the storm warnings here from Cape Sarachev up to Castle Cape, right through here, with those seas around 30 feet, and then up toward Kodiak here, up toward Sitkinak, 40 knots southwest winds, south 20 for Shelikof Strait, southwest 30 for Kodiak Island, and Bristol Bay, south winds 35 knots with 16-foot seas. And the big winds tomorrow out here in the Aleutians, we've got, let's see, 55 to 70 knot winds, strongest here 70, gusts 85 knots in the forecast on the north shore, the north side, Bering Sea side of Adak and Atka with Unamak Island, 65 to 80 knot winds on the north side there, the North Marine Zone, 60 knots out of the southwest north of Unalaska Island with 55 to 60 knot winds on the Pacific side. Hurricane force wind warnings all the way out to, say, just near Kiska, and then storms west of that. And for the next day, bring it down to, let's see, storm warnings for the eastern Aleutians, west 50 knots for the Fox Islands, seas 25 to 30 feet, 45 knot winds now for Adak and Atka, and gradually diminishing down to minimum gales there from Kiska to Shimia out of the northwest. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, full gales, east 45 knots, seas 13 to 15 feet, east 30 for the Pribilof, storm warning, St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea, east 50 knots, and St. Lawrence Island, northeast at 30 knots, Norton Sound, northeast 20. Outlook for Monday here along the southwest coast. North winds 30 knots, 25-knot northerlies for small craft advisories to the Pribilof. Seas just under 20 feet there. Northeast 30, St. Matthew Island, and gale warnings north 35 for St. Lawrence Island. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, kind of a variable light wind direction there, or variable light wind speed, variable direction, 10 knots, and then 15-knot northeast winds on the central and west side. And from Cape Beaufort to Wales, east at 15. And then the outlook for Monday from Wales up to Cape Thompson, brisk wind advisories, north 30 knots, brisk wind advisories there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast 25, and then 20-knot northeast winds on the western coast. Central coast, north 15. Light winds continue on the east side there. Out of the north at about 10 knots. And for tonight, again, big storm here coming into the Bering Sea. Those winds increasing currently over the Aleutians will continue to increase, obviously, as we just saw the marine forecast. Widespread area storm and hurricane force wind warnings out through tomorrow there. Otherwise, wind and precipitation trying to reach the southwest coast late tonight and Kodiak. Mixture of precipitation continues for the Panhandle, but mostly in the form of snow for Klondike Highway, Haynesboro, and the eastern North Gulf Coast, with the winter weather advisory for the eastern North Gulf Coast and Yakutat, 3 to 7 inches of snow starting at noon tomorrow. Winter storm warning there for the again, the northern Panhandle north of Juneau for 8 to 12 inches of snow, Haynesboro on up to White Pass, and increasing snow. Looks like southern Alaska, and on Monday and Monday night, pretty good chance of snow here for the Cook Inlet, south central Alaska area. I'll say increasing chances of snow, with snow continuing all along the North Gulf Coast there, and then a mixture in the outer coastline. Otherwise, inland areas, they'll be in the form of snow. Especially with any elevation, increasing northerly winds, light snow though, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down to the Pribilofs. And this cold front will bring area snow with it right down to the central Aleutians on up into Bristol Bay as that main low center weakens and pulls northeastward. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.